Okay, I think we'll make a start. Welcome everyone. My name's Amy Matheson from the ICE team at Electricity Northwest. I am aware that I do show on your screen as Hannah Sharrett, so I do apologise for that. We're using the same details for WebEx. Thank you for joining us. On the session today, we have Jonathan Cropper, who is going to be delivering a majority of the session in terms of what we've been up to for our ICP commitments. We have Martin Edmondson, who is Head of Business Connections, myself, the ICE Manager at Electricity Northwest. John Carlisle is unfortunately not able to join us today, but John is, if there is any questions in terms of, from us to HV perspective, John is more than happy to pick those up after the session. We're joined by Brian Hoy, who is Head of Market Regulation, and Hannah Sharrett, who is Connection Stakeholder and Engagement Manager. Simeon Knight, who is Land Rights and Consents Manager for the South.
This is a short presentation. We've got an ICE commitment that we've put together around the Bilateral Connection Agreement. First things first, I'll just describe, for those of you that may not be aware, what a Bilateral Connection Agreement, BCA, is. So a Bilateral Connection Agreement is the industry standard document that's contained in Schedule 13 of the DCUSA document. Any connections for companies who are parties of the Distribution Connection Use of Systems Agreement, DCUSA, would use this. It's for all connection activities. These will be predominantly IDNOs, that have requirement to be connected to Electricity Northwest's distribution network. And most of these IDNO connections will be things like LV extensions to E&W's network or E&W HVRMU, LV cabinets, that type of thing. These agreements just record and document the interface between the IDNO and the DNO network. Thank you, Amy. Next slide. So why do we put so much importance on the BCA document? Well, Electricity Northwest is an asset owner, and the BCA records the point of interface between E&W and IDNO network, and it defines things such as the agreed maximum load and accurate information, because we're an asset owner, is essential for management and maintenance of our assets. So we do play and put a lot of importance on the accuracy of these documents. Thank you, Amy. So our ICE commitment, as I said, we put in committed to this year, was that we will proactively engage with our stakeholders, such as yourselves today, to review the BCA process and to keep our stakeholders informed of any changes. The first thing we're going to do to meet that commitment is to look to obtain feedback from our stakeholders and perform an internal review, look to identify areas for improvement and share any proposals with stakeholders, which is exactly what we'll be doing in a moment, and then look to implement and embed those process improvements. So hopefully some of you may have participated in a questionnaire that we sent out in August. The questionnaire went out to all our stakeholders, and there was a number of questions. It was only a short questionnaire, but it was a number of questions that got to the heart of the BCA process. I won't go through them all in detail. I have documented the answers on the next 2 or 3 slides, but we'll just go through them and pick out the highlights. So the first question we asked is what your current view of the BCA process was. And as you can see here, 30% thought it was very good and 30% thought it usually works for me. So overall, around 60% thought the process was potentially fit for purpose, but the more concerning thing was the 40% that thought it doesn't always work and it could do with an improvement. Thank you, Amy. Like I said, I'm not going to go through all these in details, but in a nutshell, if we look at the left-hand pie charts here, this is all around the timescales for production of design approvals and to have the returned signed BCAs back to the IDNOs. And overall, you can see the numbers there suggested that we very rarely provide the BCAs with any sort of timescale that either the ICP or the IDNO, whoever the stakeholder was, timescales that they were comfortable with. And the right-hand slides there, just some questions around the actual format, the look and content of the BCA, and a question there around whether we should make the documents available for self-serve. I think the important thing on that one to show is that there was a 40% of stakeholders agreed that it should be self-serve. Another 20% thought it might be a good idea, but just not at the moment. And 30% actively disagreed, with 10% abstaining. One last question on the questionnaire was if we just had to choose one change to the process, what would have the biggest positive impact on yourselves? And you can see overwhelmingly 70% of stakeholders suggested that it was around timescales following design approval. So the actual creation and delivery of a BCA document that could be signed by the IDNO. Okay, so as I said, what does the results tell us? Well, 60% thought the process works most of the time, but 40% only some of the time. So clearly an area for improvement. Timescales are really, really important to all stakeholders. That was evident with the results of the survey. Responses suggested that the existing timescales are inappropriate to the process, and that includes not just the creation of the BCA, but also the returned B&W signed BCA back to the stakeholders. Some thought that the BCA was only part of the energisation process and didn't really understand it or got themselves too concerned. It was just a way of them getting their energisation. That suggests, because we had quite a few that answered in that manner, that quite a number of stakeholders potentially don't understand what the document's for or its importance and significance. So clearly we've got some work to do there as well. There is some interest in making the BCA self-serve, and clearly one of the most important things to come out of it was the document should be available within the shortest possible time period following design approval. Thank you, Amy. So what are the areas we've identified specifically that we need to concentrate on? Well, I think the survey shows that there's potentially a lack of knowledge and understanding of the BCA document itself and its requirements. There's clearly no defined or agreed SLAs with our stakeholders. It's unclear what those are, what timescales should look like. It's difficult to determine a clear starting point for any SLA that we do introduce, because quite often design approval isn't the appropriate time. There's still issues outstanding, such as have all the legal clearances been met, the IDNO substation name and number have been provided, that type of thing. Disconnect between the design approval process and the contracts process. That was an internal issue that was identified as part of the feedback, that sometimes the contracts team weren't aware of what the design approvers had done. So clearly, again, work needs to be done in that area. There were delays with the IDNOs providing some of the information, such as I've said before, such as their name and number of the sub, and there's quite often changes to the original requirements that require additional design submissions, so that would also cause a delay in potentially delay in the production of the BCAs. I think if we hold our hands up, there's the main focus of the design approval process has been to meet our regulatory obligations, and occasionally the BCA has suffered as a result of that due to workloads. So again, that's something that we need to investigate and improve. Thank you, Amy. So getting on to the proposal. So the proposal is how we're going to resolve this, make life hopefully easier, and introduce some service levels for this. Is we internally use a number of BCA templates that we've created over the years, and the proposal is that we publish these templates on our external website, make them available to ICPs, and give them the opportunity to complete them and submit them with their design submission. The advantage of that, if we go through the proposal in a bit more detail, so if you do submit your template with your design submission, then we can review that template as part of the design approval process. If you're unable or don't provide a completed template at design submission, then we will provide a partially completed template back to yourselves within 5 days, within 5 working days of design approval. And then as a result of that, ENW will commit to provide the BCA back to yourselves with full signature within 10 working days of whichever the latter is of the receipt of a completed template or design approval. So if it's submitted, just as an example, if it's submitted with your design submission on design approval within 10 working days of your design approval, you will receive your BCA for signature. If we complete the BCA or it comes in later, at a later stage after design approval, within 10 working days of receipt of that completed template, we will commit to provide you with your BCA for signature. Oh, sorry, Amy, just go back to there, just ever so slightly, thank you. So the important thing there is that we must have the completed template at least 10 working days prior to a submission of an energisation request, just to give us time to get the BCA back to you so that you can then provide it back to us signed, and give us opportunity to sign and return prior to energisation. So please make sure the template's in at least 10 working days prior to your submission of energisation request. And then we will equally commit to sign and return your completed signed BCA within 10 working days of receipt. Nothing changes on the mailbox where those signed contracts should be sent still into the contracts mailbox. Thank you, Amy. So just to summarise what I've been through today and to go through the next steps. So as I've said, the BCA is a very important document to Electricity North West and the IDNOs, but you know, certainly to us, it's an important document, and it's really essential that we have accurate information on our network and those interfaces with IDNOs. We've reviewed the BCA process with stakeholder feedback, and we have identified several inconsistencies as we've discussed. So we've proposed some improvements that we've just discussed, and we intend to apply those proposed improvements and the new process to all designs submitted after the 30th of September this year. So from the 1st of October, we will publish the templates on our external website. If you complete those and provide them with your design submission, as I said, we can review it as part of the design submission process. Alternatively, we will provide you with a partially completed template within 5 working days following design approval. And then I think it's only right if we introduce something new that we review how things are going. So we're going to put a follow-up review, follow-up stakeholder feedback sometime in Q4 between January and March. So just looking at those next steps. To get us prepared, there's been quite a lot of activity behind the scenes. Myself and Martin have been furiously getting up to date, making sure we sign and return any outstanding bilateral connection agreements that we're awaiting signature by Electricity North West. Those lists are just about clear and we're up to date. With only the very latest still requiring signatures. We're going to publish the templates as I've discussed and make them available on the Connections Contracts webpage. And the BCA, if possible, should be provided at design submission. Okay, thank you for that. So, on the subject of design submission, we did a little review again of the design submission pack and the process, and a review of the actual design approval process as well. So this follows on very nicely from the previous topic. So as you should all be aware, following acceptance of a connection offer, the ICP yourselves will submit your design for approval by one of our design approval engineers. The design submission pack should typically include the schedule of works to be delivered, including any phases, the approved design and plan, the adoption plan, which specifically highlights the areas of land ownership along the cable route, the asset values, costs, and details of any legal consents that are required. And as you'll be aware, Electricity North West have 10 working days to either approve or reject the submitted design. And then following design approval, Electricity North West will provide the ICP with a site-specific bilateral adoption agreement that requires signature by the developer and the ICP prior to energisation. The adoption agreement records all the information in the design submission and provides Electricity North West with an indemnity on the adopted cables for a period of 2 years. So what are some of the issues with the current design approval process? Well, there's certainly, from my investigations, quite often a lack of clarity and understanding of what should be included in a design submission pack. I know Dylan and Jason are on the call. not exactly including you in that. I know some of the design submissions I've seen from yourselves are very good, but some other ICPs do struggle with the information that's that needs to be presented in a design submission pack. And as you'll be aware, you know, it's sometimes a learning curve. If there's omissions from the design submission pack, it risks the design being rejected, which obviously causes things such as the need to submit multiple design submissions. It creates frustration for the ICP for the rejections, and for the E&W design approvers with going through multiple submissions for sometimes very simple designs. That then creates delays in design approval, which creates delays in producing the adoption agreement, which then potentially creates delays in delivery of your project. So some of the potential improvements that we've been considering are to first of all try and increase the awareness of the minimum information required at design submission, just to try and reduce the number of delays and rejections just down to simple data emissions. We're going to look to simplify the design submission template to assist ICPs with this. We're going to look to provide specific guidance to support the design submission template, and improve and simplify the quality of and any onboarding material on the website, which can also potentially be used for refresher training for new recruits, new design staff into ICPs as well. We're going to ensure that we continue to develop a consistent and fair approach to the design approval process. We now regularly talk to our design approvers, talk through some of the common issues, and make sure that we provide common, fair, and consistent responses on a number of design submissions. We're going to look to publish some feedback on what those common design submission errors are, just as a point of learning. There are some very common occurrences. If they're common, that's because people are obviously not understanding what needs to be submitted. So that goes back to the first point on this slide. And then we're going to try and, or we will, produce the adoption agreement in a timely manner following design approval. So how are we going to do this? What's our proposal? Well, I think my interpretation of the design submission pack is that it's quite a lengthy document, and even though it may help people in some respects, I think it sometimes goes into far too much detail, and it's probably a little bit unwieldy and is rarely used. So to that end, we propose to retire the existing design submission pack. To replace it, we're looking at introducing a simplified bilateral adoption agreement template that will be available, currently is available on our website. And our proposal is that the bilateral adoption agreement is submitted as the design submission. So if you complete the template as it's laid out on our website, provide that to us as your design submission, then we will review not only the documentation within it, but that will also have the effect of creating the bilateral adoption agreement and having it reviewed at that design submission and design approval process. To get round the issue of outstanding consents prior to energisation, those consents will be caveated out in the bilateral adoption agreement template, just to a promise that they will be provided at a later date if required. The beauty of this proposal is that once you've got your design approved, you will also have your bilateral adoption agreement for signature available to you on day 0 of receipt of the Form B, and any subsequent design revisions can be provided again on the next version of the BAA, the approved BAA. So we just subsequent design submissions, any changes to the design are just submitted on the your approved bilateral adoption agreement under the next version. That gives us the beauty as well, is that it helps us track, record and manage where the bilateral adoption agreements are from design submission, and we can in turn introduce a simplified, transparent process behind the scenes. We should have reduced any conflicts or misunderstandings of where the adoption agreement is in that approval process. And I think that's the last slide, unless I'm mistaken, Amy. Yeah, so
thank you, Jonathan.
okay.
So does anybody have any questions following those 2 updates from Jonathan before we move on?
Just on the design submission process, Jonathan. So
Yes.
with the BAA template, if any ICP gets to the stage where they're authorised to self-approve their designs,
Yes.
would you still be looking for that BAA template to be part of that self-design?
That would be the preferred route. Yeah, because you know, we still have to we'd still review the design ad submitted, even though it was a self-design approval, just for quality. But if it comes in on that template with all the documentation that's required to make that decision, on the completion of that design approval process, you would also have your adoption agreement available, version controlled and recorded.
Okay.
Thank you, Simon. Any more questions in regards to those 2 proposals?
Jonathan, it's Jason.
Hi, Jason.
Hi. Just wanted to ask a quick question. We seem to be struggling for feedback from designers at the moment. Really struggling getting answers back in a timely fashion. Is that mainly due to remote working, or is it like lack of resource, or?
Which particular stage of the process is this, Jason? Just for clarity.
There's a couple of schemes that we've got at the moment that we've had the designs rejected based on potential land consents issues.
Okay.
Now, obviously, this is probably a conversation outside this meeting, but just actually getting feedback to our questions, which we predominantly put into an email in the first instance. But I have been trying to get people to pick up the phone a bit, but we are struggling getting hold of people. I was just trying to understand if that's mainly due to the remote working or whether it was just struggling with resource.
It shouldn't be either, to be perfectly honest. So if you've got a specific example, if you want to send that across to me, Jason, I'll more than happily investigate.
I mean, rightly or wrongly, Jonathan, I've sort of like briefed my team that it was sort of like you will have seen some correspondence from my team and myself over a few different things. Unfortunately, I've pimped your name out around our office as being the person to go to if we're reaching any sort of like resistance, not resistance, but we just escalate it to yourself. Now, I'm aware that, your workload is probably astronomical, but without that, we really are struggling when we're trying to, you've got a developer breathing down your neck and we're trying to give them an update.
No, absolutely. Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, it may be worthwhile, just in case I don't pick up immediately, if you want to copy in the ICE mailbox as well, then at least we can capture any of these issues and I can investigate them. But,
I mean, we do try and in the first instance address it to the particular engineer, and then if we're struggling for feedback, we will escalate it to yourself. And I have briefed the team just to always copy in ICE as well. Yeah. And it's like I said, I don't want it to come across like we're telling tales out of school about the particular engineer. I'm sure their workload is extremely high as well. But we just need to understand, even if understand the timescales of the response to a particular query, at least we can manage our clients' expectations.
No, absolutely, Jason. It's absolutely right to escalate those. I think certainly some people have been having some Outlook problems. There's been a Microsoft issue that's affecting some people. So, there's a risk that just one of our team is actually not going to need to go through. So at least if you're escalating to Jonathan, he'll be able to pick them up to the team and follow them through.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, Jason, we can pick it up offline if you like after this session, and I shall have a look at getting an update for you from Jonathan.
Fantastic, thank you.
Sorry to interrupt as well.
Sorry.
I've got it's more of a little issue really. When it comes to myself submitting design approvals and other ICPs, if we will, we tend to be getting our answers literally, say if it was a rejection or so on and so forth. I know you guys have got an extensive workload and you've got 10 days to approve. But we tend to get our answers on the 9th day of every submission. Where dealing with, obviously, we all have contacts within other ICPs, so on and so forth, and other companies. They seem to be getting answers 5th day, 4th day, a lot sooner than everybody else. Is that something that would be able to be looked into, or?
Yeah. So I mean, we've published our stretch target. We do try and on average try and do all our design approvals within eight working days rather than the 10, and that's been the case for a couple of years now. And but I mean, it would seem strange if you're being singled out with that approach, and maybe people feel comfortable that
sometimes
it's something that I've been made aware of, but I will investigate. I'll make some inquiries, because I'm sure we're not picking on you, Dylan.
No worries.
I mean, if we're in naughty corner, Jonathan, if we find out that we're in naughty corner, then that's fair enough. But
at least there's something we can do about it then, to maybe improve, shall we say?
Absolutely.
As John said, our average is we track our average as one of our ICE commitments, as you'll see one of the later slides. But we're just about we've got a target of 8, and we're just about there. So it's been it's been one that we've been close to the target probably for the last 2 or 3 years, and the guys have had to work hard, particularly over holiday periods, to try and actually keep that sort of ticking over. So we'll have a look at the spread and say, but I suspect, I'm sure there will be cases where somebody will have had it on day 5, but I don't think it's systematic. But absolutely, we can have a look at the spread and mix of the data.
Yes. Yeah. No, absolutely.
Could I just ask one quick question? Sorry, just one more about design related. So we don't do too much work in the ENW region, but we've struggled to find documents, design documents on your website. I didn't know whether there's if there's a kind of a review process that you're going to sort of go through to make sure everything's on there, or
Yeah. Part of my part of what just mentioned then was trying to improve the quality of the information around that can be used as sort of onboarding material.
Right.
So for new ICPs or ICPs new to our region, we do. I've noticed being in this role for the last 12 months. I'm asked the same questions from every new ICP. So just to save time and effort for yourselves and myself, is one of the things that I was looking at, trying to produce some better documentation that can either be used as an onboarding material for new ICPs or for new recruits within an existing ICP, just to make them familiar with the process itself. So yes, that is something that I'm looking to deliver within this financial year.
Yeah, Simon, we'd be interested to sort of understand what you've struggled to find, so that we can look into that and improve the signposting of those documents if need be. So I can pick that up with you after the session if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. So I am going to move things along. We will stop at the end, and we'll be available after the session for any more questions. The next update is from Simeon Knight, who's our Land Rights and Consents Manager, and he's going to provide you with an update on the bespoke update report that the team can provide you with. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Simeon. I am the Land Rights and Consents Secondary Network South Manager. I run the team that acquire consents on the Secondary Networks team within the south of our region, and I have equivalent Greg Davis up in the north, who carries out the same job as I do. Split mainly, I think, using the A59 just north of Preston Blackburn, that area, as a boundary between the two regions. You may know me from the event in September 2019 when I gave a short presentation with regards to providing updates on consent acquisition by our team in regards to schemes that you submitted and which have been passed to us to acquire the necessary consent. What we were trying to do was mainly for the ICPs who were dealing with multiple schemes to sort of amalgamate all the updates into one report. Firstly, just to make it easier for us to actually pick up all of the requests that you were sending in, but also to ensure that we were responding correctly on all of the schemes that we had outstanding with you. We don't get many ICPs with multiple schemes at a time. That may just be the region. Greg may get a few more than us, but it doesn't seem to be a massive amount. So really what we were just looking to do today is to let you know that this process is in existence, just to remind you that it's there, and to prompt you, if you do have multiple consent requests, just to send them through so that we can deal with them efficiently and effectively in order to provide you with an update on the progress of any acquisition consent. So what we do ask for you to do is hopefully to produce like a little table with the site address, the Energy Solutions 55 reference, and then what we can then do is just reply directly to you with an update in relation to those particular schemes. We're probably suggesting, a monthly request to us is probably sufficient. For those of you who, deal with us as a team and solicitors acquiring consents, you know that the process doesn't necessarily move particularly fast, and therefore we do believe that a monthly update does seem to be okay. And once received, we will aim to get your response back to you within 5 working days of it coming in. We will provide the updates directly to the email address that has requested the updates, and we will deal with any comments and responses on that as we get them in. It's not aimed at replacing any direct contact you may have with any members of mine or Greg's team on ongoing schemes. So if you do only have, say, 1 or 2, you are chasing those directly with the Land Rights and Consents officer that's dealing with it. Continue to do that. This isn't to replace anything, any kind of update that we do provide, but what it is, it's a process more to pick up those multiple schemes that you do have outstanding with us, just so that, as I say, that we can provide them to you a bit more effectively and a bit more efficiently. So if you do need any more information, my contact email is below at the bottom of this page. Drop me an email and I'll get back to you as soon as I can do. Thank you very much. And are there any questions? I'll take that as a no. Thank you.
No, Simeon?
Yes.
Simeon, this is Jason.
Hiya, you okay?
Yeah, not bad, thank you. Just got a particular scheme I just wanted your take on, really. We have a scheme that's just been rejected from design. It's going to be predominantly IDNO adopted. The POI is actually in adopted land just outside the point of connection, which is at a substation. So from the POI, it goes for a short distance in adopted land and then goes into the developer's owned land but it goes through probably 3 separate titles that are all owned by the developer. Now, we've had a rejection on design based on land consents. Surely, if the POI is in adopted and it's all IDNO adopted through the actual developer's land, I don't really understand why ENW would reject it.
It shouldn't be rejected based on anything to do with consents that need to be acquired. I would suggest exactly the same to our statutory business, because we don't know whether we can or can't acquire the consent. And from our point of view, from a stat point of view, from point A to point B, who's doing the investigation and who's proven that there are however many different landowners. With your side, obviously, there is some investigation work to be done at that point, and any third-party consents need to be acquired by you anyway. So,
I mean, it might be helpful, Jason, just send the specific through, and then Johnson can have a look at why his team have rejected, and he can liaise with Simeon, and we can review it, really, because it's a bit hard. It's much easier when you can see the specific layout and understand from whoever's rejected and why, and if we've got that one, we can get it back quickly to you. Will do.
I think what I'm trying to get to here, Brian, is that our understanding is correct, that once we're past the POI, really the land consents are not your issue.
Yeah, that's why I think we probably need to look at it ourselves and see, and Jonathan can review that with his team to see, if they've, not applied our policy correctly, then we can update that with them and actually get that approval reversed. But if there's something else that not clear on exactly what they've worried about, that's a bit I think we need to just check, and absolutely, if we've got that wrong, we'll get it correct.
Yeah, if we're making mistakes, the sooner I understand what they are, then the sooner we can rectify them and make sure it doesn't happen again for all third party.
Or if we think we've done it right, we can at least clearly articulate what the issue is, Jason. So absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's what we're after here, Brian, is that, you know, if we can understand something better as to why it's been rejected and you know, it's going to serve us in the future moving forward, so we don't put something like that in front of you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's why I'm quite happy, you know, for us to look at it. But I think it's easier for us to look at the specific. We can talk to whoever did it, understand why they rejected it, and we can take
Super, thank you.
It's easier sometimes looking at the specific rather than the general point, because it might be something really peculiar, that one that is different to you know, the logic you've just described there. So yeah, and I say if we've got it wrong, we'll get it corrected and rebrief our staff on it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
No problem at all. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Okay, so just a quick update from myself in terms of where we're up to from an ICE work plan perspective for this year. We have covered a couple of the topics in today's session, and I think the important point to stress is that we're on target to complete all of these by the end of this year. In terms of our KPIs, I know we've mentioned before for the, you know, Dylan mentioned about the design submission, we are outperforming our targets from a regulatory perspective at the moment. But as I say, we can pick up any individual issues offline, and I'll certainly chase that up for you, Jason. So in terms of where we're up to for this year, we're in a great position as we get to the midway mark. We are going to start to, you know, hopefully in the last 2 quarters be able to do our face-to-face events again. But, you know, as it stands at the moment, we're going to be carrying on with the webinars as we are at the moment. So without further ado, I'm not going to take up any more of Brian's time. Brian's here to give us just a quick update on ED2.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Amy. Just flip on. So just to, you know, as I think most of you know, ED2 is our next regulatory period that kicks in from April 2023, and Ofgem are in the sort of midst of they're still developing their thinking on it, and they published in July their methodology consultation, what's called the sector-specific methodology consultation, because it relates specifically to electricity distribution, because they did similar things for gas and transmission. You know, theirs were probably last year, and we're getting now close to the end of that consultation period. So they've got a consultation, and basically Ofgem will make a decision in December that will narrow down exactly and be clear on what they intend to take forward. So today I'm just trying to give you a very quick counter through the sort of main thrust of the aspects for major connections. So if you just flip on to the next slide. So as I said, the closing date is next Thursday, 1st of October. So if you do want to have a look, the link to the actual documents there on the slide, and it's got the specific sections and the paragraphs that you need to look at of the suite of documents. And mainly what I'm going to describe in a minute is what Ofgem are proposing, which is removing the ICE mechanism and replacing it with a new mechanism. And they just identified there some of the deficiencies that they thought that Ofgem perceive with ICE, that they don't think DNOs have sought to address customers' concern and priorities enough. They want to encourage more standardisation, and they want to encourage the progress that some companies have made to become minimal levels of service, and they want it to be more quantitative rather than a subjective measure. Let's go on to the next slide, please. So basically the proposal they're consulting on, and to be honest, I don't think it's very fixed in stone. We had a working group call this morning, and I think they're still refining their thinking on this, but what they've consulted on is a framework that doesn't apply to the market segments that pass the competition test. So that's very similar to ICE, and the logic is got some elements that's similar to ICE in a way, in that they're based on connection strategies in their business plan submission. So Ofgem envisages that as part of our ED2 submission, we submit a business plan that covers all our costs, but that would also include connection strategies. And I've got some slides here that set out some of the content that Ofgem think that would cover. And the mechanism they propose has got what's called a business plan incentive. So basically, Ofgem will assess those strategies. If they think they don't meet Ofgem's expectations of what the DNO should do, we could be exposed to a penalty. But, and I suspect it may be in the unlikely event that we are seen to outperform or exceed Ofgem's expectation, then there could be some reward available for those DNOs. The second bit of the process then is what's called an ex post assessment. That's just a looking backwards assessment after the period. And again, a potential for penalties and rewards, and they just set the scope of the incentive. So if we go on to the next slide, it just builds that up in a little bit more detail. So they've identified three different principles. One about information, one about simplicity and transparency, and one about delivering connections that meet customers' needs. And I've got some slides that will just flick up and not going through in detail in a minute that identify some of the baseline standards that they've identified. So as I said, the idea is that the DNO will have to link into, for each market segment, those principles and the baseline standards, and make commitments with deliverables that actually show how we would actually deliver against those and improve the service to customers. Importantly, they've said in the consultation that those will be funded through baseline allowances, though today they were just clarifying that they would still expect a similar pass-through of cost to connection customers and to just customers through allowances. So how they wrote it and how they interpreted it today may be changed slightly. And then, as I said, they will hold us to account for the delivery of those strategies through the period, and they're thinking of doing that twice: once in the price control period within the 5 years, probably after the end of year 3, then once at the end, and then use that to assess whether there are any rewards or penalties as a result of that. Just flip on to the next slide. So I'm going to on to the next one. So these, I'll not go through these. You can just read them when we send them out, or read them in the consultation, but they've set out some more detail on the baseline standards that they expect DNOs to do. So, you know, they're built down, they provide customers with clear connection, quotation, cost breakdowns, listing out cost components, etc. So, you know, they've got some things in there. None of them, most of them are really things I think DNOs to some extent are doing now, and that maybe don't lend themselves to the quantifiable metrics I think Ofgem has aspired to, but most of them I'd say are actually sort of hard to disagree with, and I'd say most DNOs would be doing most of those things now. So there's a bit of refinement to do in those, but that just sort of sets out the principle of it. So there's a slide each for each of the three principles there, but you can have a look at those at your leisure. So it was mainly just to give you a heads up that that's out there for consultation now. You've got probably just a week left to get your response in if you're interested, and obviously if you want to have a chat about it in more detail, happy to do that now or later.
Okay.
Fabulous. Thanks a lot. Thanks everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Cheers.
No.